Welcome back to the deep dive. For those of you who have been traveling with us on this larger conversation, you'll know our focus is always on those essential junctions.
Those meeting points.
Exactly. The places where, the deep wisdom of the past really intersects with the overwhelming complexity of what the sources call the global now.
In our source material for this dive, drawn from decades of intercultural work, it often uses this really powerful metaphor for the journey.
The bamboo path.
The bamboo path, building bridges between these worlds, navigating modernity, but always following that path toward a quiet, focused temple.
A place of intention.
Precisely. And that image, finding that quiet direction amidst all the clamor, it just perfectly sets the scene for today.
It really does.
We're undertaking a pretty profound reflection here, one that's been distilled from, well, extensive research and hands-on work across 6 continents.
6 continents. So this is a truly global perspective.
It is. The insights are all focused on global youth, their struggle for direction, and really the core essence of the leadership insights we're going to need for the 2030s.
And we're going to move entirely past the superficial assumptions, right? The idea that the younger generation somehow lacks initiative or talent.
Oh, absolutely. The sources are very clear on that.
Instead, we're leaning into what's identified as a shared, universal struggle, a dynamic that is not, and this is critical, it is not a deficit of potential.
There's more potential today than ever before.
More than ever. But it is a deep, critical crisis of internal direction and, crucially, a profound crisis of focus.
That's the foundation of all of this, and it leads directly to the core question that the author is perpetually addressing to millions of young people around the world.
From global capitals to remote villages.
Everywhere. And the question is, how, in a practical sense, how do I begin to build a meaningful, sustainable future when the world around me already feels so overwhelmingly complex?
And technologically demanding, economically unstable.
And often just intensely fragmented. It's a huge question.
It's an acknowledgement, then, that the problem isn't inherent to the person. It's not a personal failing.
No. It's structural, it's environmental, and that requires a shift in mindset, a shift in strategy, not just trying harder.
Right. And that systemic diagnosis brings us straight into our first section,
Yeah.
really defining this universal condition of overwhelm.
The source material is fascinating on this because it pinpoints a specific recognizable moment that arises in the lives of young people, and it happens regardless of their geography or their socioeconomic status.
And what is that moment?
It's a simultaneous and frankly often devastating disconnect between their internal state and the external reality they're forced to operate in.
Okay, a disconnect. And the language used to describe this dual reality is incredibly vivid.
It is.
On the one hand, they describe the external environment as just relentlessly too loud, too fast, too uncertain.
Constant sensory overload. Instant communication demanding an instant reply.
Radical acceleration in technology, paralyzing ambiguity about the future, with climate, politics, work.
But the truly critical part of the observation is the internal state that mirrors all that external chaos.
The other side of the coin.
Exactly. In response to all that noise, their own inner voice, the voice of instinct, of intuition, of self-knowledge, it feels, and the term used is, dangerously quiet.
Dangerously quiet. Wow. It's just silenced by the sheer volume of the world outside.
It's completely drowned out.
And that phrase, dangerously quiet, it just perfectly captures that loss of internal grounding, doesn't it?
It does. And the sources confirm this isn't an isolated feeling. It's universal. It's heard consistently from, say, a new graduate trying to launch a business in Lagos.
Or a young programmer battling burnout in Seoul.
Or a student struggling with meaning in Berlin, an activist navigating political change in São Paulo. The emotional reality is identical, even when the cultural context is vastly different.
So we should probably spend a moment dwelling on the precise pressures that are causing this, because it helps explain why that inner voice just retreats.
Yes. It's not just some generalized anxiety. The demands are specific and they are cumulative. They stack up.
Okay, so let's start with the digital and the psychological. We're talking about genuine digital oversaturation. Right. A constant state of being available, being responsive.
Which leads directly to significant emotional and cognitive fatigue. Your attention is fragmented by design. The entire system is built to fracture your focus.
And then you layer on top of that these hard economic realities that are, for the first time, really globally synchronized.
Right. Rising living costs, particularly in housing and education, coupled with this pervasive job insecurity.
So achieving basic stability, the very foundation that previous generations kind of took for granted, is now a tremendous, often terrifying source of anxiety.
The goalpost for just making it has been moved impossibly far back.
Then we add the weight of societal and cultural expectation. They're wrestling with this immense cultural pressure,
The difficulty of respecting tradition, family loyalty, community expectations.
while simultaneously trying to adopt this modern, individualized, global identity that's required for tomorrow's economy. It's a huge conflict.
And this all plays out against a backdrop of increasing political fragmentation, geopolitical instability.
So the institutions they're taught to trust, governments, global bodies, even the very concept of democracy, they all appear fragile, uncertain.
And that deep ambiguity about the future, it undermines the entire premise of planning or making any kind of long-term commitment. Why plan for a future that feels like it might not even arrive in the way you expect?
And the final, and maybe the most debilitating pressure of all, is the unspoken one. The source points out that global youth feel they have to project total confidence.
Always, you must succeed early, succeed perfectly, and succeed confidently.
And you have to manage to do all of this, even when you're internally just gripped by fear and confusion and doubt.
This creates a constant performance pressure. It's the need to wear the mask of achievement, which only serves to further silence that inner voice.
Because the inner voice is the one that's saying.
I'm terrified, I'm overwhelmed, and I have no idea what to do next.
Which brings us to this profound paradox that really defines this generation. The world tells them, through every marketing campaign, every inspirational quote, that they have the ultimate freedom. You can be anything.
The choice is infinite.
But in that moment of infinite possibility, the world offers, as the source says, too little guidance on how to begin.
It's the tyranny of choice, but without a compass.
That's it.
And the critical dynamic here, and why it's so debilitating, is that if every single path is theoretically possible, but the map and the compass are missing.
Or worse, the map is just 1,000 conflicting directions.
That is the very definition of paralysis. You just freeze at that intersection of infinite potential and zero clarity.
So if paralysis is the outcome, we have to isolate the true cause. It sounds like the source material is asking us to stop talking about untapped potential, which is vast,
Right.
and start talking about something else entirely, which moves us right into our next key section.
Precisely. We move from that diagnosis to the distinction between potential and direction.
Okay.
The core finding here, and this is affirmed by thousands of mentorship conversations, is that the struggle is not fundamentally with potential. They have that in abundance.
We'd established that.
The struggle is with direction, clarity, and focus. Potential is just static energy. Direction is the application of that energy toward a meaningful goal.
That is such a vital reframing for mentors, for leaders, for parents, for anyone listening.
It is.
Because if you have limitless potential but zero direction, that energy is just dispersed and wasted. It's like a massive floodlight without a target. It illuminates nothing specifically.
A great analogy. And the sources illustrate this beautifully by exploring the regional differences that, despite their very distinct contexts, all share this emotional core of overwhelm and lack of clarity.
Okay, let's look at those geographical nuances, because understanding the local barrier helps us define the universal solution. Where do we start?
Let's start in many parts of Africa. The source identifies an immense brilliance, a powerful entrepreneurial spirit, and just exceptional resourcefulness.
You see it everywhere.
But this brilliance is perpetually held back by unequal opportunity.
So the challenge there isn't motivation, it isn't drive, it's the path itself.
Exactly. If you are a brilliant student in Accra or Nairobi, you might know exactly what problem you want to solve. Your direction is clear, but the infrastructure, the funding, the institutional access, it's all obscured by systemic barriers.
So the external environment is actively denying the chosen path.
It's blocking the path. Now, contrast that with the situation across large parts of Asia. Here, the tension is much more internalized.
How so?
Potential is squeezed between the weight of tradition and the breakneck speed of acceleration.
Okay, squeezed. That's a powerful word. Give us an example.
Sure. Consider a young engineer in Tokyo or Seoul. They're pressured to enter a stable, familial, high-status profession, honoring the obligations of tradition.
Right, the expected path.
The expected path. But simultaneously, their work involves leveraging bleeding-edge AI or quantum computing technologies that require entirely new ethical, philosophical, and professional frameworks that often break decisively with that past.
So the conflict isn't just about a career choice. It's a conflict between two incompatible realities being lived at the same time.
Yes. It creates this tremendous internal friction over which direction is the right direction, or even which identity they should inhabit from one day to the next.
And moving westward to Europe, the challenge is different again.
Very different. The source describes the experience as receiving a high-quality, often free or subsidized education.
A huge advantage.
A huge advantage. But this education comes without certainty. You have the credential, you have the depth of knowledge. Yet the pathways provided by established institutions like career tracks in civil service or legacy industries, they feel unstable or irrelevant in this rapidly shifting global economy.
So you end up with highly educated, often multilingual graduates in Berlin or Paris who are functionally prepared for a world that doesn't exist anymore.
Precisely. They are deeply unsure where to point their efforts because the destination they were trained for has either vanished or is under serious threat.
Their education prepares them for the how, but the global instability just removes the where.
Exactly. Now, North America presents a highly specific psychological struggle, and it's tied very closely to its cultural expectations of, rugged individualism.
Yes.
The source describes it as confidence layered over quiet anxiety.
The performance of confidence.
Performance, that's the word. Outwardly, there is the social expectation of self-assuredness, of entrepreneurial success, of always being on the hustle.
But underneath that required layer of projected competence is the exact same universal fear and lack of directional clarity we see everywhere else.
It's just that the mask is thicker. The performance of success becomes an end in itself rather than a means to a meaningful direction, and that leads to immense psychological dissonance and burnout.
Okay, let's go to South America. What's the dynamic there?
In South America, particularly in regions facing recurring political or economic crises, the source observes immense passion, a powerful internal and cultural drive.
Did you feel it?
Absolutely. But this passion is constantly fighting instability.
So when the currency devalues overnight or political certainty just vanishes, the direction you committed to 6 months ago might be rendered totally irrelevant.
It makes it nearly impossible to sustain focus or momentum.
So the problem there isn't a lack of commitment. It's that the ground keeps moving underneath your feet.
It does. Sustaining focus requires a degree of environmental reliability, and when that is absent, that internal drive for direction often just burns out in the face of continuous disruption.
And finally, Oceania.
Here, dreams are described as being stretched between responsibility and modernity.
Stretched, another very physical, visceral word.
It's the pull between traditional obligations, often very strong community or family ties that dictate certain roles, and the relentless, often irresistible draw of a modern, highly individualized, globalized lifestyle.
So that stretching makes finding a singular direction incredibly taxing. Every choice feels like a trade-off.
It's a trade-off. You're either sacrificing personal ambition for communal duty, or you're sacrificing that sense of belonging for personal acceleration.
What's so fascinating here is how the source ties all these geographically distinct pressures, from economic barriers in Africa to the internal friction in Asia or the political chaos in South America.
So back to the exact same internal consequence.
Exactly. They all result in a profound loss of focus and direction. The environment is unique, but the psychological outcome is universal.
They are all struggling profoundly with how to begin that one meaningful step.
That universal struggle for direction. It sets the stage perfectly for Section 3, which introduces the source's powerful, I would say almost existential redefinition of what focus even is.
It's a complete reframing.
Because if the world is constantly trying to pull us into chaos, the antidote can't just be a spreadsheet or, a time management system.
No, absolutely not. We often misuse the word focus. It is habitually mislabeled as discipline.
Which has all these connotations of rigidity, strict compliance.
Even a kind of punitive adherence to a schedule. But the sources fundamentally assert that focus is something far more primal, far more essential.
And what is that?
Focus is survival.
Survival. That is a game changer conceptually. It instantly elevates the concept from, like, a corporate productivity hack to a fundamental human necessity in the 21st century.
It is. The source elaborates on this beautifully. It says, focus is the act of protecting your inner world in a time when everything external demands a piece of you.
Protecting your inner world.
Think about the implication of that for a moment. If the external world is constantly demanding your attention through 247 digital feeds, cultural anxiety, political urgency,
Then the only way to retain your identity, your ethical compass, your mental resilience.
is to actively, deliberately protect that quiet center, the internal source of your values and direction. Focus becomes a conscious shield against chaos.
And if you fail to protect that inner world, the consequences are severe. It's not just about missing deadlines, is it?
Not at all. It's about deep internal compromise. Without that protective focus, you become susceptible to burnout. Your ethical boundaries erode because you're running too fast to even notice them.
And ultimately, you experience a loss of your authentic self. That is why the source calls it survival.
Indeed. A scattered mind is an exploited mind. That's a key takeaway.
Say more about that.
When you lack focus, you spend your life reacting to demands placed upon you by others, by algorithms, by market forces, by peer expectation, rather than acting from your own internal intention.
So your energy is just constantly drained.
Constantly, leaving you without the capacity for deep work or a meaningful connection.
So what's the practical application of this survival mechanism? How do you actually do it?
It's detailed to be deceptively simple. Focus is defined as choosing one meaningful step and staying with it long enough for it to matter.
One meaningful step, not 10.
One, it's about singular, sustained effort, not frantic, multi-directional effort.
This is the anti-glamour approach to achievement, then.
Completely. The source makes it abundantly clear that true focus is not dramatic. It is not glamorous. It doesn't look like a motivational speaker on a big stage.
What does it look like?
It looks like quiet, consistent, repetitive work that often feels boring or unrewarding in the short term. But, and this is the key insight, it is the beginning of every future worth building. It's the foundational masonry work done quietly and imperfectly long before any celebratory roof raising.
This raises a crucial question for you, the listener. What does choosing that one meaningful step actually look like in practice when you're facing all the immense pressures we outlined earlier?
Well, it looks like prioritizing intention over immediate gratification. It looks like committing to the direction you chose through self-reflection, even when the world is throwing endless distractions at you.
It's a theme of pace we'll return to. But before that, we really need to examine the skills that are failing young people on a global scale.
Yes, which leads us to what the source calls the missing global curriculum.
Right. And this moves us into the analysis of these critical skill deficits seen everywhere, regardless of education level or economic standing.
And the sources highlight two major missing pieces. The first, and maybe the most surprising in our hyperconnected world, is effective communication.
That does seem counterintuitive, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Young people today are perhaps the most expressive generation in history.
They can talk, they can share, they can debate, they use every digital medium imaginable.
But the sources identify a deep struggle beneath all that surface expression.
They do. They struggle to reveal, to forge authentic connection, or to speak honestly and without a mask about what truly hurts them or what they truly need.
And the anecdotes cited are, they're compelling and honestly pretty heartbreaking.
They are. We hear about the European woman who speaks 3 languages fluently, yet she often feels profoundly misunderstood in all of them.
Or the North American student who feels connected to everyone and no one at the same time, trapped in this web of curated, shallow communication.
It's a crisis of intimacy and authenticity, not a crisis of language proficiency.
And the source dissects the specific cultural anxieties that get in the way of this honest, meaningful communication.
Yes. For example, in many parts of Asia, there is a deep, pervasive fear of speaking truth because they don't want to disturb harmony.
So the immense value placed on collective peace, on maintaining face, often outweighs the individual's need to express their personal truth or their internal pain.
That dynamic means that instead of direct, honest feedback, you get subtle avoidance. Or you get indirect communication that requires immense cultural knowledge to decode.
The intention is to protect the group.
But the result is that the individual suffers in silence. And that often leads to internal collapse when the pressure to maintain that harmonious facade just becomes too much.
And what about in other regions?
In regions of South America, and this is true globally within many competitive professional cultures, there is an intense worry that expressing emotion or doubt or the need for help will be judged as weakness.
So that's a severe barrier to genuine connection, to vulnerability, and most importantly, to seeking the necessary guidance that would provide that clarity they so desperately need.
So if communication is more than just words, what does the source material suggest it truly requires?
It lays out four critical components, four pillars of communication that actually lead to connection.
And they are presence, cultural humility, emotional intelligence, and the courage to be seen without masks.
Let's unpack those because
Yeah.
they are crucial for a global audience. Presence. That means putting down the device, silencing the mental noise, and being fully available to the other human being in that moment.
Simple, but not easy. Then there's emotional intelligence. This is the literacy to accurately name your own internal states. I am scared, I'm overwhelmed, I'm joyful, rather than resorting to vague language or just avoidance.
And cultural humility. This is maybe the most important skill for leadership in 2030.
I would agree. And it's not just politeness or tolerance. It is the active, continuous acknowledgement that your deeply ingrained framework for expressing doubt or frustration or even ambition,
Might not be universal.
or even understood by the person you're speaking with.
Can you give us a practical example of that kind of cultural misalignment?
Certainly. For instance, in some parts of the world, silence in a conversation is a sign of deep respect. It indicates the listener is carefully processing what has been said, or perhaps waiting for a more senior person to speak first.
Okay, a sign of respect.
But in a highly direct, say, North American business context, that same silence might be interpreted as passive aggression, disinterest, or even an attempt to delay or obstruct.
Two completely different interpretations of the same behavior.
Exactly. Cultural humility requires recognizing the validity of both frameworks and then adapting your own expectations to bridge that gap, rather than just judging the other person's behavior through your own lens.
And that last one, the courage to be seen without masks. The vulnerability required to build true connection. That is clearly a monumental challenge in a world so obsessed with curated perfection.
It is.
And here's where it gets really interesting because the source transitions from communication to its necessary internal partner, self-reflection.
This is unequivocally called the missing global curriculum.
Why missing?
It is missing because the entire modern education and career system focuses almost exclusively on external metrics of success.
Right. So young people, they know their grades, they know their skill certifications, their CV obligations.
They know all the myriad societal expectations placed upon them by family and culture. They are experts in external achievement and output.
But, and this is the core point of this whole deep dive, they often do not know their fundamental values, their non-negotiable boundaries, their limits of capacity, or their authentic, quiet dreams.
They have incredibly high external clarity, but dangerously low internal self-awareness.
That deficit means they are brilliant navigators of a ship, but they have absolutely no idea what port that ship is actually meant to be sailing to.
They're optimized for the journey, but completely directionless in terms of the destination.
And this lack of internal mapping leads to the crucial questions the author poses repeatedly in every mentorship session on every continent.
Existential questions that challenge the very foundations of their externally built identity.
Questions like, who are you when the expectations of others are removed?
What do you want when no one is watching your performance?
Which dreams belong specifically to you, and which belong to culture, family obligation, or just fear?
These are the heavy questions. And the source makes it clear that self-reflection is not some gentle academic exercise, nor is it a luxury you indulge in once you've made it.
No, it's described as the absolute non-negotiable foundation of a meaningful life.
And the consequence of lacking this foundation is severe. It defines the condition of drift.
Without self-reflection, youth drift. They are subject to the whims of all those external pressures we discussed. The noise, the anxiety, the expectations. They just move where the current of culture takes them.
But the transformation is also clearly defined. With self-reflection, they anchor.
Anchor, I like that.
They gain the necessary internal weight and stability to resist the noise and the relentless current. That anchor gives them the power to consciously choose that one meaningful step and stay with it.
Turning focus into survival. It all connects.
It all connects.
Now, it's self-reflection is the anchor, and honest communication is the means of connection. We have to address the practical barrier that often prevents young people from securing both.
The fear.
The fear. The universal hesitation to ask for help or seek guidance. And that moves us to Section 5.
And the source material is very clear that this reluctance, this failure to reach out, stems primarily from deep-seated fear, not from arrogance or pride. And that's a key distinction for any leader to understand.
We need to understand the roots of that fear, which are profoundly vulnerability-based, aren't they?
Completely. It's the fear of being judged for their confusion, the fear of rejection, the fear of being profoundly misunderstood.
Or the even greater fear of disappointing someone they respect, a parent, a mentor, a potential employer.
But there is an even more powerful, deeper fear that is prevalent globally, rooted in that perfectionism culture we discussed.
What is it?
It's the fear of taking up space they were never taught they deserved.
Wow. That insight about self-worth requires a deep moment of reflection for all of us.
It does. It's this idea that if they are not already perfect, if they don't already have the answer, then they are not entitled to the mentor's time, the institution's resource, or the community's attention.
It's a subtle but devastating sense of internal disqualification.
And that feeling of disqualification is just exacerbated by the digital world, where every achievement is instantly broadcast. It reinforces the idea that if you are struggling, you are uniquely failing, and therefore you must hide your need for help.
So the source must offer a counterpoint to this debilitating fear.
A critical one, it says. Leadership begins with one brave reach.
One brave reach.
It's a challenge to both the young person and the mentor. We have to redefine what the outcomes of reaching out even mean. We have to shift the focus away from the perceived success or failure of the request itself.
Okay, so how do we redefine those outcomes?
This redefinition is vital for building the resilience required for sustained effort. The sources offer a beautiful framework for interpreting responses that removes the sting of failure. Let's hear it. It teaches that a no is not a personal indictment or a rejection of your worth. It is simply redirection.
Redirection toward a path you haven't considered yet.
Exactly. A yes is not validation of your inherent worth, which is already secure. It is simply momentum.
A resource to be wisely used before you need to reach out again. It's temporary assistance, not permanent validation.
Precisely. And silence, that feared non-response, the unanswered email, the unacknowledged request, that is not proof of your insignificance. It is simply an opportunity to demonstrate and develop resilience.
So it forces you to pause, check your direction, and maybe try a different angle of approach.
The overarching lesson here is that none of these external outcomes, yes, no, or silence, define one's core worth.
So what does?
The singular thing that defines and builds worth is the act of consistency. That brave, continuous, imperfect act of reaching out, asking questions, and seeking direction regardless of the immediate, often disappointing responses.
That consistency, that willingness to show up and try again after redirection or momentum or silence.
That is where the source argues that identity truly forms. It's not in the victory, but in the sustained movement toward the goal.
So this global perspective, it really shifts the focus away from the idea that young people need some single, instantaneous solution to their anxiety.
Absolutely. The real needs, according to this deep research, are foundational and human.
Clarity derived from self-reflection.
Presence and communication.
Genuine guidance, emotional literacy to name their pain.
And most importantly, safe, non-judgmental spaces to explore their identity and direction without that constant fear of external judgment.
It's a call to move away from noise and pressure and toward genuine, supportive mentorship that emphasizes the internal journey.
And that realization leads directly into our final thematic section on how they must approach the future itself.
The necessity of alignment over acceleration.
Yes.
This is such a powerful conclusion, especially for a generation constantly bombarded with the mandate to hustle. The world demands impossible speed, instant results, constant optimization.
Faster, higher, more?
But the source counsels youth to have the courage to deliberately, consciously move at a human pace.
The source articulates the core philosophy of this entire body of work here, and it focuses entirely on the differentiation between urgency and intention.
Okay.
The future of our world, particularly the most sustainable and ethical solutions, will not be written by urgency. It will not be shaped by those who rush without purpose, only responding to the latest crisis or the newest trend.
Instead, the future will belong to those who walk with intention, even if slowly.
It's the ultimate rejection of the current cultural idolization of hustle. It shifts the value metric entirely. The value is not found in how fast you move, but in how meaningfully you move.
This brings us to the core concept. Success is defined less about acceleration, that constant frantic rush to the next goal, which often leads to burnout.
And more profoundly about alignment.
And what do we mean when we talk about alignment in this specific context?
Alignment means that your external actions, your chosen pace, and your deliberate direction are congruent with your deepest internal values.
With the values you discovered through that process of self-reflection.
Exactly. If your actions align with your internal moral compass and your values, then the speed at which you move is far less important than the integrity of the movement itself.
I think we need to push back on this just a little bit, because this could sound like a luxury afforded only to those who are already stable.
A fair challenge.
For a young person in South America battling instability, or one in Europe facing job insecurity, how can they afford the perceived luxury of moving slowly and intentionally? Doesn't survival demand acceleration?
That's a critical question, and it's one the source addresses head-on. It acknowledges that acceleration often feels necessary for survival, but it argues that frantic, unaligned acceleration leads only to exhaustion and misdirection.
Ultimately undermining survival.
Precisely. The intentional pace is not about moving slowly in a passive sense. It's about moving deliberately in an active, focused sense.
So it's about cutting out the noise, cutting out the unaligned effort.
Yes.
If, say, 80% of their acceleration is spent chasing expectations and distractions that aren't even theirs, then intentional movement, slowing down the pursuit of what doesn't matter, is actually the most efficient path to stability and long-term security.
Exactly. Intentional movement is efficiency defined by purpose. It's the difference between sprinting aimlessly across a field until you collapse and walking steadily toward a known, valued landmark.
The intentional pace is the one that guarantees you reach your destination, rather than just burning energy on a trajectory set by someone else's expectations.
Beautifully put.
And the quiet truth that the author shares with every young person they mentor, across every continent, is incredibly reassuring. It's entirely permission-giving.
What is that truth?
You do not need certainty, you do not need perfection, and you certainly do not need applause to begin.
You simply need movement.
It's just movement.
And that movement should begin quietly, away from the digital noise. It should be imperfect, because perfection is the greatest paralyzer of all.
You can even begin with doubting your capacity, doubting the path, and starting even when you feel profoundly unprepared.
It is permission to fail, permission to be human, and permission to start before you feel fully ready.
The goal isn't to run the race perfectly or to avoid every stumble. The goal is simply to move.
With heart, with integrity, and with presence.
And this ties every section together, doesn't it? It emphasizes that the health of your internal state is paramount over the external pressure to perform.
The final, reflective conclusion of the source is immensely hopeful and entirely empowering. It says, "The youth are not lost. They are not a failed generation.
They're simply waking up."
They are waking up. And awakening is a choice to focus, a choice to stay the course, to grow, and the choice to lead one deliberate, intentional step at a time. It affirms their profound ability to choose direction over chaos.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, whether you're mentoring or leading or just navigating your own path through all this complexity?
I mean, it means the pathway to a meaningful life and a future of sustainable leadership is paved not with frantic, unaligned effort,
But with quiet, internal, deliberate choices. It means you have to prioritize the foundational work. Focus is survival, which means you must actively protect your inner world.
Communication requires presence and cultural humility.
And self-reflection is the anchor that prevents that debilitating drift.
And this global emphasis on clarity, on ethics, presence, and intercultural understanding, this forms the essential compass required for the next decade.
As outlined in the Global Leadership Insights 2030, leadership is shifting from managing resources to managing internal direction and ethical boundaries.
That's the future.
And we'll end with the profound truth that builds on the source's closing statement. A truth for anyone feeling overwhelmed by the speed of the global country. Now, the future will not belong to noise. It will belong to intention.
It will belong to soul.
It will belong to those who choose the brave human pace, walking long enough and steady enough for their footsteps, imperfect as they may be, to truly matter.
So the final question for you is a simple one.
What is one small, imperfect, intentional step you will choose to take today?